You are not just another hustling salesperson. You are the expert, the resource, the valuable partner for your clients. And how you grow your business should reflect how your clients see you. Welcome to the Roadmap to Grow Your Business podcast. We generate referrals without asking, build positive client experiences, and help you take control of your business. Here's your charmingly sarcastic host, Stacey Brown Randall.
Hey there, and welcome to episode 164 of the Roadmap to Grow Your Business podcast. I'm your host, Stacey Brown Randall. Well, it has been way too long since our last live referral challenge. Yep, it's been months and months, pretty much the entire summer, since we have done one of our 4-day or 5-day live referral challenges. So we're bringing one back because it's the perfect way to close out the summer and get ready for the start of September. So we have one coming up at the end of this month. Now, more details will be out soon, so you can be on the lookout for it. We'll talk about it here for the next few upcoming podcast episodes. Of course, if you're in our Facebook community, our free Facebook community Referrals Without Asking, you will see notification about it there. And if you're on our email list, you'll definitely receive an email to do a one-click sign up and join us for our 4-day referral challenge coming up at the end of this month. So just be on the lookout, just kind of telling you about it now so you know it's happening. If you've ever done a challenge with us, we'd love to welcome you back. Maybe you just need a refresh or a restart. And if you've never done a challenge with us before, we pack a lot into our 4-day and 5-day challenges. The one at the end of this month will, of course, be a 4-day challenge. We pack a lot in, but we build them so they're not overwhelming. So you're just spending a little bit of time each day learning something you need to know about having the best referral foundation possible. Okay, so that's coming up into this month. I'm just telling you about it now because I want you to be on the lookout for it. More details to follow. Just keep a listen here on the podcast. Make sure you're in our Referrals Without Asking Facebook group. And of course, if you're on our email list, you will hear about it there too. And, we're going to put it on the rest of our social media channels as well. All right, let's dive in to today's episode 164. So we have been on a journey, my friend, since episode 151, when we first dove in and started unpacking and dissecting the client experience. Yep. As we get ready to finish up our client experience series, we just have 2 episodes left. Can you believe it? This one and the next one. Crazy time. I know. But we couldn't finalize, we couldn't finish, we couldn't wrap up this client experience series without doing something very, very important. So now it's time to take what you've learned and turn the tables. That's right. We are going to put the microscope on your current client experience. Yep, that's right. It's time to unpack your client experience. The inspiration for this episode, which actually wasn't a part of the original client experience series when I was first laying it out, when I was doing the outline of this back at the beginning of the year, because as those of you who follow this podcast regularly, I try to theme out our episodes, sometimes done in short little series, 1 or 2, 3 episodes. Sometimes they're done in longer quarterly-like themes as well. But as I was laying it out, this episode that we're about to do right now wasn't a part of the original podcast series that I'm doing right now on the client experience. Because when I first outlined it the way that it was for the client experience book that I'm working on, this is actually something that's broken up throughout the book, and it's not like in one concise place. Because throughout the book, I provide these exercises to allow you to deconstruct and then reconstruct your client experience based on what you've been learning as you go chapter to chapter. So it wouldn't have made a lot of sense to do that deconstruction that we're going to do today in each of the episodes that we've been doing over the client experience, because it would have made those episodes too long and a little bit more than easily digestible as we were getting through our summer months. So that's the reason why I said, you know what? I didn't plan to do this because I wasn't doing it throughout each episode as we went, but I'm going to give you one episode dedicated to unpacking, deconstructing your current client experience. So I have pulled out some of the most important exercises for this episode. Right now, I know the book won't be out until 2022. So sorry about that. But because the book won't be out till 22, I didn't want to keep you hanging until then to how to do some of these exercises and go through the unpacking process of your current client experience. So I took the best the best exercises, what I find to be the most important exercises, right? And I made it a little bit easier for you guys by compiling them into this episode. And to make it even easier, we created a client experience worksheet that you can go download on the show notes page. So the show notes page for this episode is stacybrownrandall.com/164. And of course, Stacy has an E, and that's 164 as in 164 for episode 164. So you can go to the show notes page and download this client experience worksheet. Actually, what I'm going to do for this episode is really read from that worksheet and walk you guys through it step by step. So what I highly recommend and I highly encourage you to do is just pause this episode right now. If you're not, like cutting your grass or laying out by the pool or commuting, because some of you are commuting back into the office or back to networking events and things, or obviously if you're cutting the grass, that doesn't make a lot of sense. But if you've got a minute, what I would do is I would pause this episode and I would go to the show notes page and I would download this 2-page worksheet. You may need some other pieces of paper depending on your client experience, but that'll get you started. And what we're going to focus on is deconstructing your existing client experience. And then at the very end of this episode, and you'll also see this on the last part of the worksheet, I'm going to then give you some questions to consider of how to reconstruct, improve, tweak, whatever you need to do to make your client experience better so that it is stickier and so that you can get more repeat clients. And of course, what we love, more referrals as well. All right, so make sure you go and download that on the show notes page, stacybrownrandall.com/164. Alrighty, let's get started. So here's the very first step to deconstructing or unpacking your current client experience is you're going to write it down. I know you may be thinking to yourself, what? I actually got to write something down of what I do every time I take a client from start to finish? Yes, my friend, you do. So if you are looking at the worksheet and you are seeing this in 2 ways, you do not need to do both. But I know some of you are very much like list makers. And so you think in a linear fashion. And so it's like, I do this, then I do this, then I do this, then I do this, right? And others of you are much more visual. And so it's more of like the opportunity to sketch this out and have room for that. So we've provided both of those to you, just depending on how you like to think about things or how you like to visualize things. And so if you're I like to do bullet points and I like to do linear thinking and in order, then you've got a list of lines where you can just go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right, all the way down and list out what happens during your client experience. If you're more of the, I need to visualize this out, you'll notice you've got 2 stars and it says starting point in the center of the page, in the center of the page near the top. And at the bottom of the first page, it says ending point with another star. And basically what I want you to think about doing is like zigzagging your way across that page as you write out the different things you do during your client experience. And specifically, think about this like a Candyland board game, right? If you have no idea what Candyland board game is, just go Google it, my friends, and you will see it is like Chutes and Ladders, right? It's like just this one like winding roadmap, this one winding board game that kind of takes you from the starting point to the ending point, and it's not a straight line. This will give you space if that's how you think in terms of writing things out more visually versus top to bottom, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like numbering them out or bullet pointing them out. So that's just something for you to consider when you're looking at the worksheet. What I want you to do is write down your current client experience. Okay. So if you find it overwhelming and you're like, I got to write down what I do with each of my clients, let me help you think through this, right? Think about one of your more recent clients who started working with you. Now, I want you to list out or map out all of the steps you took them through to deliver your service. Or if you were a product-based business, what it took to deliver your product. So it may be helpful to think through the answers to these questions, right, as you're thinking through unpacking and deconstructing your client experience. What happened first after they said yes to working with you? Was it the very first thing was that they signed a contract or they signed an agreement or did you send them a DocuSign? Like when they said yes, I want to hire you, right? What's the very first thing that happens? Like the very first thing that happens when somebody says, yes, Stacey, I want to join your Growth by Referrals program, they're doing it all online, right? They are registering, they're signing up, they're putting in their credit card information, right? They're deciding how they want to pay for the program. Do they want to pay in full and save a little bit of money? Do they want a payment plan? They're doing all that themselves online because that's how they start the program. But that's like saying yes, like going online and signing up and submitting your credit card information to join my program. That's my version of someone saying yes. Your version may be that you actually have to deliver a contract and you have to get it back from them. But when someone says yes to me, I know immediately what happens. There is an email that goes out. Now, there's a whole big thing that gets triggered in the back end that my team and I start working on. But for them, there's also an email that's immediately automatically sent out through my system that was like, welcome, right, to the Cool Kids Club. Welcome to your referral explosion. So think about what happens first when they say yes to working with you. And then how do you follow up with information, right? Do you send stuff in an email? Are you scheduling appointments? Like, what is the process that happens next? Was there a meeting scheduled or maybe a series of meetings? Was there paperwork for you to complete or did they need to complete some paperwork? What information did you need to gather from them? How did you deliver the work? Right? So think through some of these things and let me kind of give you a few more things to think about, right? What are the phases of the work you do? Now, we've already been talking about this. You guys know we look at the client experience from new, active, or ongoing, and alumni if you have the third stage. I don't need you to get into those details yet, but do think through about, okay, I did this and then we scheduled some meetings and then I have to follow up with an email and then we send this service out and then we take all their information and we create the memo or we create the review, the work, the financial plan, the whatever it is that you're doing, right? How and when do you communicate with your clients? And what happens when the work is finished? Or for those of you where the work is never finished, right, and parts of the work you do every year over and over or every month, like a bookkeeper, like what is that process? Do you deliver any client appreciation touch points, like maybe like a holiday card or a client appreciation event, right? Again, it's important to complete this step with what you are currently doing. Please do not include what you wish you were doing or plan to do or do sometimes when time allows or when you remember to do it. This is the thing that you consistently do for every client. It's not the wish, it's not the desire, it's not where we're headed. That's important too. But what you actually do each and every time, this is what you are currently doing. This is what you actually do now, even my friends, if it's the bare minimum for each and every client. Okay, so like I said, we have this page created for you specifically so you can go in and bullet point these things out, or if you're more visual, draw it out in our little starting point, end point, little map game. And you may need more paper than what I have allotted for you here. So you may decide, hey, that was great, Stacey, but I needed 3 more pages. Whatever it is, add pages as you need it, or make more copies of the front page of this 2-page PDF. Right? So you're going to write down your current client experience, and you're going to think through some of those questions that I was asking you. And that's going to kind of help you start thinking through, okay, as I go through this process, what am I doing now? Because this is what we're doing, folks. In this episode, we are unpacking your existing client experience because I'm going to leave you at the end of this episode, right, with what I want you to consider of how you're going to improve your client experience. And that's coming up at the end of this episode. So just hang tight. Right now, this is all about your current client experience. Now, it may help you to think about the things you do, and you may actually write them down out of order. I do need you to go back and put them in order as best you can. If 3 things happen at the same time, right, and you're listing these things out, so it's like number 1, number 2, and then maybe it's like 3 things happen for number 3, then it's like 3A, 3B, 3C, right? Whatever works for you so that you can visualize, you can get out of your head and get down on paper what this process looks like. But it is important that you do put them in order. Okay, then we're going to move on to step 2. And step 2 is where we're actually going to label those touch points. So we are going to start calling, like we've been calling through the series, everything you do where you deliver on something for a client, every step in your client experience is going to be called a touch point. So in your list or on your map on page 1, right next to each of those bullet points or each of those little client experience moments, what we're now calling touch points, I want you to write down if it's a work touch point or a relationship building touch point. So remember, a work touch point, just put a W by it. And if it's a relationship building touch point, just put an R by it. So W for work, R for relationship. Some of those you're maybe like, they're kind of both. Then just put WR. Like, let's keep it simple. Let's not overthink this. It may be helpful for you to go back to episode 155 when we were talking about work and relationship-based touch points if you need a refresher. We'll link to that in the show notes too, so that may help you. But if you need a refresher, go back to episode 155. And you're going to label each one a W or an R. So each bullet point, each point on your map is going to be labeled whether it's a work touch point or a relationship building touch point. So now you're looking at this and you're like, okay, I've got my client experience from start to finish down on a piece of paper. And I've gone back in and for everything I wrote down, I have decided if it's a work-based touch point or relationship building touch point. Now let's move on to step 3. Step 3, you're going to determine your stages. So in your list or map that you had on page 1, you're going to draw a line between the touch points to separate out each stage you have. So you're either going to be drawing, right? If you think about it this way, you're either going to be drawing one line or 2 lines. That's it. You're not getting line happy here. So if you have just 2 stages, they're a new client and then an ongoing client because the work never ends. Like when you're working with a financial advisor or a CPA or a bookkeeper, right? And the work never ends. Then you have 2 stages of the client experience. And so you're literally just going to draw a line for what separates the new stage from the ongoing stage. That's really important that you think through what that looks like for you. Okay? Now, if you have the 3 stages, though, if you have the new stage, the active stage, and the alumni stage, which means there is a moment when the work they're doing with you ends. So maybe you're a real estate agent, and once you get them into the house, the work ends. Or they're an interior designer, and once you have finished the installation and all the pretty pictures have been taken and everything's done, right? That is when the work is done. Or as an attorney, maybe once you help them set up their LLC, the work is done. So think about this from that perspective. If you have the 3 stages, then you're going to draw 2 lines and you're going to separate the new from the active and then draw 1 more line and separate the active from the alumni. Now, when you think through this, the stages, we go over this in episode 156. I give you the overview of all 3 stages in that episode 156. So if you're still a little like, I don't really remember, am I new plus ongoing and the work never ends, or am I new, active, and alumni because the work I do ends? Like, which one am I? If you need to go back, that's going to be episode 156. But remember, we dig into each of the 3 stages in 3 separate episodes, which is 157 for the new stage, 159 for the active or ongoing stage, and 162 for the alumni stage. So you can also listen to those episodes as I dig in deeper as to what makes up the different pieces you need to know about each of those stages. Doing this exercise for this episode, I am under the impression you've kind of listened to these episodes, so the words and the lingo that I'm using, it makes sense to you. So when I say determine your stages and draw a line that separates new from ongoing, or draw 2 lines that separates new from active, and then draw another line that separates active from alumni, I'm making the assumption you kind of know what I'm talking about because you've been following along with this series of episodes on the client experience. But if you're confused, folks, you know what to do. Hit reply on any email I've ever sent you, or hop into the Referrals Without Asking Facebook group and ask your questions. I am here to help you. If you've ever posted a question, I would guarantee you 99.9% of the time I'm answering it. The only time I don't sometimes answer it is I do believe that it has to be possible that I've missed 1 or 2 questions in the past. But I will absolutely come on board and answer it and then give you some additional resources to help you to kind of make sure this all makes sense in your mind. So you're going to draw a line between the touch points to show which of the touch points are in each stage, which means when you draw your line to separate new from active or new from ongoing, above that line will be your new stage, and you'll have probably a mix of work and relationship-based touch points. Or maybe you won't. And maybe all of your touch points are going to be work-based. That's okay. I will address that in a minute. But this is writing down what is current, what is real, not what we want in the future. If you jump to how you want this to look in the future, you're going to create so many headaches for yourself if you don't start with where you are. This is one of those things where I need you to look in the mirror and I need you to realize where your client experience is, and then stay with me to the end of this episode and I'll help you start thinking about what to change and improve as you move forward. Okay, so we have mapped out our current, existing, the real, the raw client experience. You have labeled each of those touch points within your client experience, whether it's work or relationship, and you've determined your stages, whether you have 2 stages or you have all 3 stages. Next, we're going to move on to step number 4. So for step number 4, that is actually the ideal client reaction step. The ideal client reaction step. So that is episode 154, and it was titled, This Should Drive Your Client Experience. And this is really important. Once you've mapped out your client experience, and maybe you've had to go back and listen to some other episodes, or maybe you haven't, maybe you're good to go, before you get to step 4, it's really, really important you have steps 1, 2, and 3 done, right? So as you're going through this worksheet, right, and you hear me referencing and you're like thinking about this episode, and I'm referencing these episodes to go back in because maybe you need a deeper refresher, right? But I want you to understand that if you go back and listen to what you don't understand with these episodes I've mentioned to you, and of course we'll list them out in the show notes page as well for this episode, it's really going to help you get a firm footing for steps 1, 2, and 3. Now, I'm not explaining each of these things to you with steps 1, 2, and 3 because, to be honest, that would make this episode super crazy long. It would be like reading the book. And I've done that before, and I'm not ready to record another audiobook just yet. I got to finish writing the book first before I can record the audio version. So that's why I'm referencing, hey, when you're writing down your client experience, right, this may be helpful. Or when you're marking your touch points, your work and your relationship touch points in step 2, go listen to episode 155. So that's supposed to be there to help you guys, not to create more work for you, but just to keep this as streamlined as possible for this episode. All right, so we're now on step 4. You cannot complete step 4 until 1, 2, and 3 are done if you're following along on the worksheet. But some of you, I'm thinking of you, Jordan and Joey. Yep, my 2 lawyer buddies. I got lots of lawyer buddies, but those are the 2 I'm thinking about right now because they went into the Referrals Without Asking Facebook group when I came out with episode 154 about the ideal client reaction script or the ideal client reaction exercise. And they actually had a dialogue between the 2 of them about what their ideal client reaction script should look like. So they're done. So I know they can go ahead and do step 4 really easy. For the rest of you, if you haven't done it, you really need to follow the instructions in episode 154. Again, I'm not going to give them to you here. But basically, this step is your initial client reaction is how you want your clients to feel when they are working with you and done working with you. It is the response you want from them when they're like, wow, I just didn't expect that from my attorney, or I just didn't expect that from my financial advisor. It's the words they use to describe how they feel while working with you or when they're done working with you. And the way you do this, you do an initial brainstorm. So there is room there for you on the worksheet under step number 4 to do your initial brainstorm, your brain dump of all the things you want your clients to say, right? And I don't mean words like awesome and amazing. Well, those are great. But that's not what I'm talking about. And I give examples of ideal client reactions in episode 154 because I think that's important for people to recognize. Like one of my ideal client reactions is that I want my students to always be like, Stacey was a straight shooter. Like, whereas I want to be your biggest cheerleader and I want to see you have success, I also want to make sure you get there as fast as possible, following the most direct route. And that sometimes that means I got to tell you things you don't want to hear. But I'll do it anyway, because it's important for me to get you to end point, to the finish line, to the referral explosion zone as quickly as possible, even though it's not like I can push a button and get you there any faster. And if I can take out some of the learning curve, that's my job, which means sometimes I got to tell you how you've been doing things is wrong. It's not easy for people to hear, but I'm okay with that as long as people know. But she tells me what I need to know because she's a straight shooter, and right, she does it because she cares. So you're going to list out your initial brainstorm that you did in episode 154, and then you're going to come up with your final reactions. Now, folks, on this worksheet, it's listing out 5 final ideal client reactions. You do not need 5. You really shouldn't go over that many, though. You really, really should try to keep it to under 5. You do you. If you have 6, so be it, right? I'm not your mama. I'm not going to tell you you can't. But really, really, just because there's 5 lines, they don't need to all be filled in. If you've got 3 incredible, awesome client reactions that you want from your ideal client, then go with your 3. You do not need 5, but please try really hard not to go over 5. Okay, so that's step 4. Now take a breath. Okay, what have we done so far? We've unpacked your client experience. You've mapped out in step 1 all the steps it takes for someone to do work with you. 1 through 10, 1 through 55, 1 through 110. I don't know how many steps you have. I don't know how you run your business. You've either written it down, top to bottom, right? A, B, C, D, E, F, G with bullet points, or you've got a little artistic on us and sketched it out because that's how your brain processes information, and you've got your little visual map. Then you went back in and you labeled each of those touch points, either work or relationship building. You've also determined your stages, so you know exactly what is the last touch point of the new stage before you move into the active or ongoing stage. And you've drawn a line to clearly delineate between new and ongoing, or new, active, and alumni if you have all 3 stages. Then once you had that done, you took a break and you said to yourself, well, how do I want my clients to respond when they're working with me? How do I want them to feel? How do I want them to talk about what it's like to work with me? And you went through a brainstorm and then a final reaction process to get down to how you want your clients to feel when they do work with you. And now we're going to move into our very last step, but very, very important 5th step, our consideration step. So based on what you've learned in this client experience series on the podcast, which is episode 151 through next week's episode, which is 165, these are some questions I want you to ask yourself. Number 1, what's missing from your current client experience? Or what could be improved? Look back at that new stage and those touch points you wrote out. Was there anything missing? Right? Could anything be improved? Did you not have one single relationship building touch point in that new stage? And you definitely want to add some type of relationship building touch point. Because the other thing I want you to consider is your client experience heavy on work touch points and lacking in relationship building touch points. Now, I typically recommend somewhere between 20 to 30% of all touch points are relationship building and the other part are work. So the majority is work, but some people have 0 relationship building touch points within their entire client experience. So we talk about this. Go back and listen to the series about those relationship-based touch points. And I gave you some examples and some ideas that just is there to get your brain flowing. You don't have to use the ones I give you. I'm just giving you some suggestions so you can get your ideas flowing on that. So definitely go back and listen to that episode. Again, I think I mentioned that episode was 155. But is it heavy on work touch points and lacking in relationship building touch points? Because remember, relationship building touch points is really a great opportunity, other than you delivering amazing quality work. Relationship building touch points is your other opportunity to really hit home the opportunity to generate referrals. Doesn't mean it'll happen with all your relationship building touch points, but it's where the stickiness really sets in. And that stickiness of your client experience is what allows your clients to think that you're referable and then be willing to refer you. Another consideration is one stage in really good shape, but another needs tweaking? Like, do you have that new client stage like nailed? You're like, this new client stage is amazing. But yet your alumni client stage, you're like, I don't really know what happens to my clients after I'm done working with them. I never even talk to them again. And sometimes I forget to send them a newsletter, whatever it is, right? So look, is one stage in really good shape, but where you need to focus is on a different one? Does another one need a little improvement, need a little tweaking? Does what you currently provide evoke the reactions you want from your clients? Does what you currently provide evoke the reactions from your clients that you ultimately want? Go back to step 4 and see, do you get the sense that how you're delivering your client experience evokes those reactions you said as what you want from your ideal clients? Those ideal client reactions, do they match? Do you feel like your current client experience evokes that? And another consideration is, what ideas have you picked up on from this series or heard when I interviewed other business owners about their client experience? So we did some interviews with some other folks about how they took what they've learned through the Sticky Client Experience program, which is what this series is based on. And of course, it's what my book is being written about. But when they went through the Sticky Client Experience program, like, they kind of shared some of the things that helped them and some of the things that they improved upon. And they shared some ideas. What were those ideas, right? Or the ideas that I've given you through this series. Yes, that may mean you may have to go back and listen to a couple of episodes. But guys, working on our business takes work, and you need to give some space to it. Do I think you need to spend more than like maybe a couple hours on this? No. Unless your client experience is like 112 touch points long, well, then maybe you need a little bit more than a half a day. But a couple of hours of really digging in and listening to the episodes and going through this exercises and refreshing with episodes in the series if you need it, that's an important use of your time. So the last thing I want you to do is then write down, as you're asking yourself these questions and these considerations, write down what you want to improve. And then we're going to baby step it. That's right. We do not try to improve our client experience all at one time, unless you don't have one. And then, of course, go for it, right? If you're a brand new business. But if you have a client experience, we baby step how we improve here. So we are like, you know what? We're just going to improve the new stage first. And then when our team or ourselves, if you're a solopreneur, get used to implementing the new additions to your client experience in the new stage, then we move on to the active or ongoing stage. And then we move on to the alumni stage. Now, again, you can go in any order you want, but one stage at a time, one improvement zone at a time, that's really, really important, because if not, you're going to overwhelm yourself. And that is the last thing I want you to do, is overwhelm yourself as you're going through this whole process, okay? Again, let me just say this one more time. I just feel like I need to say this. When you are unpacking your client experience and then thinking about how you want to improve things, you do not jump in and fix everything at one time. But as the owner of your business, you do need to stop and spend some time, because building an intentional client experience is just that. It's intentional, which means you have to take intentional action to dissect, to deconstruct, to unpack what you currently have, and then take what you've learned in this series and what you've heard me talk about, and what you've heard other business owners talk about. Take what you've learned and then figure out what you are going to tweak in your client experience. Now, of course, if you want help with that, that's why I have a Sticky Client Experience program. But if you're good to go with based on what I've given you in this, I don't even know how many episodes we're in now, like 13, 14 episodes of this series and this worksheet and some of the other things that we've talked about, then go, right? But if you need some help, of course, the Sticky Client Experience program is here for you. Happy to talk to you about that if you're interested. But whatever you do, you need to spend some time building an intentional client experience, because if you don't have an intentional client experience, you got some kind of client experience. It's just not intentional, which means it's unintentional, which means it may not be ultimately what you want. All right. And having an intentional client experience is kind of important because of what we're going to focus on next week, because next week's episode is dependent on it. And next week's episode is episode 165, and that's where we're going to start talking about receiving referrals from your client experience. So again, download the worksheet that goes along with this episode on the show notes page at stacybrownrandall.com/164. Get this 2-page worksheet, print it out, make copies of page 1 if you need more than 1 page. Go through steps 1 through 5 and let me know what you think. Jump into our Referrals Without Asking Facebook group, look for the post for episode 164, and tell me what it was like going through this process. I can't wait to hear from you. Until then, take control and grow your business. Bye for now.
Thanks for listening to the Roadmap to Grow Your Business podcast. To access all resources and links mentioned in today's show and to connect with Stacy, head over to www.stacybrownrandall.com.